Welcome to Candlewick Library. I'm Cheryl, and these are the books I read in June. I already put most of the books back on my shelves, so I'm just going to put up pictures of the books. I ended up reading 12 books in June, and I did take part in one readathon, but it was kind of loosely. I wanted to do the June journey with the Inklings that Luminous Libro was doing. I knew I wasn't going to do all of them, but I wanted to do as many as possible. So for Encountering a Wise Mentor, it was read the Bible, and I did. I was in the book of John, and so I finished that. Research ancient legends, read a nonfiction Inkling book or essay, and I used the same book for this as I did Discover Hidden Magic, read a new to you Inkling book. I read Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis. This book was hard to read sometimes. I found that there were some times when I would get a little bit lost in the words, but I was listening to the Literary Life podcast episodes as I read it, and that was really helpful to kind of work through what I had just read. I thought it was a really interesting book. It had a lot of depth, as you would expect from C.S. Lewis. I really liked it. I think it's become, the more I think about it, the more I feel like it's one of my favorite books by him, of the nonfiction. So I'm definitely going to revisit it later. Some of the quotes that I wrote down: the task of the modern educator is not to cut down jungles, but to irrigate deserts. One that I thought was kind of funny: a hard heart is no infallible protection against a soft head. And there were quite a few other ones, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but it was a really good book. I did not do the Set Out on a Quest where you read a short story or a novella, and I didn't read any poetry by the Inklings. For the Restore a Magical Sword, read a book influenced by the Inklings. That one I did count Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling was definitely inspired by the Inklings. In June, I was able to read Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, and I loved this rereading. I know I've heard a lot of people talk about how they don't enjoy this book because they feel like it's angsty. I have actually never felt that way. And I don't know why that is, because that will usually bother me in some books. But in this one, I felt like it was completely justified. What Harry had just been through at the end of book 4, I felt like this was a natural progression, how he acts in this book and what he goes through. However, even though I didn't feel that way, I did do the House of Humane Letters, which is run by Angelina Stanford from the Literary Life podcast. I did the Harry Potter class again this summer, and it was for books 4 and 5. And so I was reading book 5 as I was doing the class, leading up to the days where she talked about book 5. And doing that class while I was reading it, it added so many layers to it that I think that if you do think that book 5 is too angsty, if you took that class, I think that you wouldn't be bothered by it at the end either, because there were so many layers to what she did with that book. And I will have a full video on that later. I have gotten really behind on making my videos about Harry Potter, but I am going to be getting to that. I think book 2 was the last one I made. So 3, 4, and 5 will be coming soon. I'm reading in preparation of using them in literature for Maddie, but I'm learning so much that I didn't know before as well. So it was a really fun reread of the book. And I think that what I've always liked about it is that I love when an author can make me feel. And there's not very many books out there that have made me hate somebody as much as I do Umbridge. And then I was going to watch a movie adaptation for the readathon, but I didn't ever get around to it, so I didn't get that one. And then Fulfill the Prophecy, read a book about the Inklings or their work. For that, I did read The Medieval Mind of C.S. Lewis by Jason Baxter. The premise of it is that most people look at Lewis and think children's author or theologian, but sometimes forget about his role as a scholar and a teacher. This talks about his scholarship, the medieval viewpoints that inspired him. This is another one where there's too many quotes to sit and talk about all of them unless I was doing a video just about this book. But I did write down a few that I would share. The shift from perceiving the world as a symphony to perceiving it as a machine. And that was something about how our world has become. And I just thought that was really a really good quote. The modern world is peculiarly arid, a desert, not a jungle. Modern humanity has lost a sense of what the holy is. I felt like it's been one of my favorite books that I've read about one of the Inklings in a long time. So even though I didn't participate fully in the June journey with the Inklings, I'm really glad that it was on my radar and that she did that readathon, because some of these books I might not have read in June if it weren't for that. The other books that I read in June, I read Every Hour Until Then, the new timeless book by Gabrielle Meyer. And I've been hearing mixed reviews on this one, but I loved it. I thought it was great. The two time periods are going between 1938, when the world is on the brink of World War II, and the time of Jack the Ripper. I know that some people have not liked the premise of the book, but I thought it was really interesting. I think it definitely had some things in it that some sensitive people might not like as much, although she was never gory. I did guess the ending. I did, but it didn't affect my reading of the book because I thought I was wrong. So until the end, when I realized I was right, I had no idea, and I kept going back and forth on other things that could be happening. I started the book called Swallowtail Legacy. I did not like the writing, and then I read that there were some content issues, and so I decided just to DNF it since I wasn't enjoying it anyway. And then I read Hollywood Babylon by Kenneth Anger. And I talked about this, I think, last month or the month before, because I've been reading it for a few months, just a little bit at a time, that I was learning so much about the very beginnings of Hollywood and how we look at Hollywood now and we think of it as this really immoral place a lot of the time and think that it hasn't always been that way. But you read this book and you realize it's always been that way. I don't know if everything in the book is 100% accurate. However, they have taken some things out of the book in the one I had. And so I was able to see some of the things that were censored. And that's always interesting. It always makes you wonder why somebody is censoring somebody else's work, but then pretending like they didn't. They don't say it was censored. And so then you wonder about the things that they're taking out. So that was an interesting thing. It did sometimes feel more like just reading a gossip magazine. Sometimes I also felt like that the way he wrote it was assuming that you would know everybody that he was talking about and all of the situations. And so I was kind of confused in some of the areas. I did get rid of it after I read it. There were some pictures in it that I did not like. So I would say that I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but it was interesting and it did give me a lot to think about. And then I read We Were Soldiers Once and Young by Lieutenant General Harold G. Moore and Brown Water Black Beret by Thomas J. Cutler, but I did talk about those in my video about the Vietnam War, so I'm not going to review those again, just that I really enjoyed both of them. And then I was rereading The Secret of Platform 13 by Eva Ibbotson with my daughter over the last couple of months. So we finished that up. I enjoyed it. I think it's fun to read it and see the things that Harry Potter has in common with it since it was written before Harry Potter. Harry Potter is a lot better, though. I did enjoy the importance of family that is in that book, and it's just a silly book. Her books kind of remind me of a Roald Dahl type of book. I did enjoy reading it with her. I finally got to volume 6 of the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon, and once again, it was completely delightful, beautiful. I love it. I have in my reading journal a whole page and a half of quotes, so I'm not going to go through all of them. The first one I wrote down was, I do defend the philosophy that someone can fit rather snugly on an enemies list without it sneaking over into unadulterated hatred. I really enjoyed this one. This is another one where going along, I thought, okay, I'm not loving it as much as some of the other ones, but it's still really good. And then I loved the ending, so that, pushed it back up there again. I think so far, number 4 has been my favorite, but the end of book 6, I really loved. Something I wanted to have happen happens. Then I read This Beautiful Truth by Sarah Clarkson. A couple months ago, I talked about the book Reclaiming Quiet by her that is just beautiful. I love her writing style. She's a really good writer, and I always get something from the books that I've read from her. This one was mainly about her really horrific experiences with her OCD. I knew she had it from her other books, but this one really goes into detail of the problems that she has, how hard it was for her. And I had no idea that her OCD was as severe as it is. I didn't love it as much as her other books, but it was still really beautifully written and very interesting and had a lot of quotes to write down and mark. Beauty and truth are not different things. I thought that was a really good one. So there's a lot, just like in all of her other books, there's a lot about beauty. There's a lot about a beautiful way of life. And then finally, the last book I read was The Blue Castle by Lucy Montgomery. This was a reread for me. This one is so funny because when I was younger and I read it, I don't think I was old enough for the themes or something. I thought it was good, but I didn't think it was great. And a few years ago, I reread it finally and asked myself what was wrong with me because I love it so much. And so this was probably only the 3rd or 4th time I've read this one. It's a complete 5-star for me. I think it's right up there with Anne of Green Gables on how good it is. Anne of Green Gables just barely beats it for me, but my oldest daughter read The Blue Castle and she likes it better than Anne of Green Gables. It is one of my favorite books of all time, let alone from favorite books by Lucy Maud Montgomery. I love the premise. I love the characters. I love the ending. It is a girl who lives in a family that is very overbearing and quite cruel to her, really, without realizing that they are. And she's just meek and mild and never speaks her mind, lets herself be walked all over by her family. And she gets the news that she doesn't have very long to live because of her heart. So she decides that she is going to live life on her terms, and she's going to stop hiding behind the fear of her family. I have a couple of my favorite quotes, but I feel like they would give it away, so I'm not going to share those, but I definitely recommend it. It was another really good reading month. It was another month of getting to the end of the month and reading and realizing that most of the books I read this month were close to 5 stars or 5 stars. There was only a few stinkers and a few that were mediocre. So I am having really good luck the last couple of months with the books I've been reading. I'd love to know if you took part in the Inklings Readathon, and if you did, how many books you were able to get to, and if you've read any of these, and what your favorite books of June were. Oh, it was also announced that the M.M. Lion books are going to be on audiobook, I believe in August. So hopefully that will mean that they'll get out to even more people. So I'm going to say that my challenge this summer is, for anyone listening, if you haven't read The Blue Castle or M.M. Lion, to pick up at least one of them.